Today we have Professor Poonawala with us. He is from USA. He is the head of the department in University of California, Los Angeles. We have decided to discuss about few of the misbeliefs and misconceptions about Islamic belief, and one of them is about Muslim can marry four wives at a time. I would like to ask Professor Poonawala. I would like to ask Professor Poonawala to comment about what Islam says about allowing men to marry four wives at a time. So, what Islam says about allowing men to marry four wives at a time.
Before answering this question, I think one has to bear in mind that Islam was born about 1500 years ago in Arabia. So what were the circumstances at that time? Polygamy was prevalent. Again, it was a patriarchal society, meaning led by men. And in that way, when Islam was born, people used to marry, meaning they were used to have multiple wives. So the Prophet restricted it to four, because if he would not have allowed, meaning multiple wives, I think there was no chance for Islam to survive or to spread. But again, one has to bear in mind that the four wives were permitted in the Quran or by the Prophet, with the condition that men would do justice, equal justice to all four. And in the same verse where Quran permits four wives, it states that human nature is such that he cannot do justice, meaning to all the four wives. Hence, it more or less advises that they should satisfy themselves by one marriage. Now, the circumstances changed after the death of the Prophet. The Islam spread out of Arabia because Muslims conquered vast territories in the Middle East, and so whatever we call it, booty or wealth flowed into Arabia. People became very rich. Also, singing girls, dancing girls also came to Arabia. In Mecca, in Medina, there were what we call it clubs or night clubs where the singing girls and dancing girls also were performing. And given this situation that very many people became very rich, they allowed, being a patriarchal society, that okay, you can marry four, and they left it the justice to the the consciousness of the husband, and this is how I think it prevailed. But again, I think this is more or less depiction of Islam in a, so to say, wrong way. That let's consider sociologically also that how many people would afford more than one wife. The percentage was very small. However, I think one should admit that during the medieval period, probably the percentage might be higher, might be 5 or 10% of the population did have more than one wife. But coming to more, I think, modern period in the 20th century, there are statistics available that probably less than 1% of the Muslim population had more than one wife. So it was not prevalent. However, this type of misconceptions really spread about Islam because there was a rivalry between Islam and Christianity, especially in the Middle East, and that's why they said that, well, Islam allows four wives, because that was not the uh, prevailing custom or condition in Christianity. So this is totally a misconception, and I think more or less putting blame on Islam because of the internal religious rivalry. Then modern Muslim scholars have also interpreted that the four wives, meaning the stipulation is equal treatment or justice, and that is impossible. So let me state that in the early 1950s, Habib Bourguiba of Tunisia, meaning Tunisian president, he restricted that no Muslim can marry more than one wife. It was a general government rule, and I think that prevailed. Then, within a decade or two, most of the Arab or Muslim countries also introduced laws in which second wife was not permitted unless one goes to the court and obtains the permission, given the situation. If it didn't have, if the first wife was barren, then I think permission was granted. But even then, the first wife had lot of say in the matter, and if the first wife refused that no, I will not allow, and rather I would have divorce, so the first wife could seek the divorce and she could get proper compensation. And this thing continued in most of the Arab countries, even in Pakistan, more than 15 or 20 years ago. This provision was introduced by the government that Muslim cannot insist and say that I can marry or have second or third wife. No, they had to go to the court and seek the court injunction, and the same thing with the permission of the first wife. It is unfortunate that in India, Muslims have not kept pace what is going on in the outside or the Muslim world, and they take refuge that India being a secular country, government should not interfere in our religious affairs. But also it is very unfortunate that the Muslim religious leadership in India is very poor. They do not understand, and I think being a secular country and in India, as Hindus are also not permitted to take the second wife, I think the same rule should apply to the Muslims, unless I think there is a, so to say, very, what I would say, pressing need. If the first wife is barren and probably the person is rich and would like to have, but again there are provisions, they could adopt also children. So I think that it is high time that Indian Muslims should wake up and introduce changes into what is called as the Muslim personal law.
Thank you very much. Now the other point, which is uh, very famous regarding the divorce, giving divorce to the wife. There are many misconceptions prevailing in Muslims and among non-Muslims also about the way of talaq, divorce. What Islam says about talaq, there is the divorce. Please comment.
Okay, marriage in Islam is not a sacrament like Hinduism or Christianity. It is merely a contract between the two parties. And if there is a breach of contract of whatever the conditions, or if they disagree, the husband and wife, Islam permits divorce. But again, it is not made easy. And again, these are also misconceptions, meaning occurring divorce three times. It does not, this is not the proper form of divorce, but in certain areas, I think where there was not much education and there was no proper religious leadership, they permitted. But according to the all Islamic schools of jurisprudence, it is, so to say, illegal. This type of divorce is not permitted. And for the three pronouncement of divorce, the situation is like this, that again, that marriage is a contract, but divorce is allowed under number of circumstances, but then before divorce is granted, all the efforts are made by the relatives of the two parties, or I think the friends of the couple, really to try to reconcile them. And in that way, the three pronouncement of talaq is like this, that first pronouncement should be made when the wife is, so to say, out of this regular monthly period, meaning that she should be in the state of what Islam calls it purity, meaning not during this pronouncement cannot be done during the period of menstruation. So once this pronouncement is made, then he cannot make the second pronouncement immediately. Again, the second pronouncement also has to be made after a couple of days or couple of weeks, and again the same condition that the woman should not be going through her monthly period. So the general understanding is that probably third pronouncement by which the divorce becomes final, meaning this has to be made on three separate occasions after lapse of certain period. It means there would be lapse of couple of days or couple of weeks, and in that way, meaning it is not a hasty judgment. If a person is angry and in a fit of anger announces or pronounces three times divorce, divorce, this is not a valid divorce, meaning has to be this three pronouncements has to be done, as I say, or as stipulated in Islamic law, over a period of several days or several weeks. And the reason for that is that probably after first pronouncement or second pronouncement, the couple might realize that this was not the best decision they have made, and they might reconsider, and then they can reunite. So only under these conditions, if the third pronouncement is made, then it becomes the final. So this is again a misconception, I think, about Islam.
The other two questions out of this explanation comes to my mind. One is, how much period is to be allowed in between two pronouncement of the talaq? Number one, is there any mentioning? And secondly, is a woman also granted power to give divorce to her husband by this method or not?
The period, I think, between the two pronouncement, again, it varies according to the four Sunni schools of law, as well as with the Shias. There are no, so to say, definite time period, but generally they said that at least one pronouncement should be made during the one period of purity. So it means that for the second pronouncement, one has to wait at least another, so to say, 3 or 4 weeks. So there is a waiting period or lapse, I think, of 3 or 4 weeks between each pronouncement. And again, I think the period given is that the couple might come to their senses and might reconcile, because there is a hadith which again I cannot not recall, that okay, meaning divorce is the last consideration in Islam, meaning it is permitted, but it is not that easy to divorce a wife. Then you're addressing your second question,